This landscape is, you know, it can be somewhat representative of a lot of places around the planet, where you have your hills, your knolls at the top. Everything runs down. You got a little bit of a valley here. There's probably a little stream running down here, and this is set up. If this has been set up and you had livestock on here, this is perfect setup for an extracting pattern. If you remove most of the vegetation, even when the cows are on there and they do their business, when the rains come, it takes all of that nutrient, not all of it, but much of it, and washes that nutrient right off the landscape. So in these landscapes, the driest part of the landscapes are always the part where water can move in several directions away from it. Like at the top of this hill, water can move, 360 degrees, right? It can go any direction. This is a ridge right here, so I can drop water on that, and you can see water goes two directions, left and right. So this is the driest part of the landscape right here. Right here is the valley. So when I drop water anywhere around here, eventually that water ends up in the valley. See that? So now this tends to be the most moist part of the landscape. So for permaculture design, what's the number one premise or the number one thing we say about water? We want to hold it where?
High.
High on the landscape, as possible and feasible, right? So, well, here it is. Let's put a pond right here, right? But if we put a pond right here, how are we going to fill it? I mean, there's no pond. I mean, if you live in a landscape that gets 100 inches of rain a year, you might be able to just dig a hole and collect the water that just lands in it from rainfall, and maybe you'll end up with a pond. But most other places, you got to have a source of water to fill and maintain a water level of a pond. Otherwise, you lose all the rain just from evaporation, just by being exposed. So in every water holding situation, we need a watershed. We need something that's capturing water and bringing it to this point where we're going to hold that water on the landscape. All right? So there's no watershed for a pond here. All right? Now, there is a point on this landscape high on here that does have a sweet zone, and it's right here in between these two ridges or these two knolls, and it's right here, and we call it a saddle dam. In a saddle dam, all you have to do is press your thumb in and push out, and so with a little bit of work with a bulldozer, a little better than your thumb on a real landscape, with a little bit of work, we can actually create a bowl just by pushing out the middles. It's called a saddle dam, and now we've actually got a place to hold water. But the water that falls in here, there's a little watershed here. Any water that lands right there is going to go in. Any water that lands right there and there will go in. But all of this water is going away from it. So one of the things, as permaculturists, we say, well, we know how to move water using swales or ditches. So what if we were to take and run a swale around the landscape? So this is a water harvesting ditch on contour. I'm just doing this by eye, so this is too low over here. I can tell you right now, that's going to spill over right there. All right, and we could do the same thing over here, couldn't we? Just have to be sure I'm going slightly uphill and then downhill. So now, any water that lands on either one of these places now brings the water in to my pond, and I've got a fighting chance at holding water on this landscape. All right? These now become the watershed for that pond. In general, kind of as a simple rule of thumb, it's not absolute, but you kind of want a ratio of 5 to 1. If you've got a 1 acre pond, you want to have about 5 acres of watershed feeding the excess water to your pond. All right? Sometimes you get by with a little less, depending on how rapidly the water is soaking into the ground. Sometimes you need a little more. But in general, that would be a safe bet. So now we've got a pond, but what is one of the things we always put into our earthworks whenever we're doing anything when we're saving water? What do we build into the system?
Plants.
Well, eventually. But we have to deal with overflow. It's called a spillway. All right, or sometimes referred to as a sill, but it's a spillway. Well, I need a flat spot, and I know that the water is going to run down the valley anyway. I mean, whatever. So when this thing overflows, I want the water to run down where I want it to run down, which is right here. And then I can actually pick it up and use it somewhere else if I want. I could also make the decision, no, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave that nice and high. And when this thing fills up, I'm going to have the water go back out over into the swales. And I want it to spill over right here onto the driest part of the landscape. So when this thing fills up, it actually will come back this way, and then it'll spill out the ground this way instead of more water rushing down here into the valley. You're in control. You get to decide where you want that water to go.
You do both?
You can do both. And you actually, as long as I set these up and they're at the exact same elevation, then when this thing fills up, water will start creeping over here and over here and over here all at the same time. And you use instruments to do that, and we'll show you how to do that this afternoon, all right? So anyway, I just wanted to show you that you've got choices here. For now, I'm going to go ahead and keep it coming down the valley, so I'm going to block this back up. Here's my spillway. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and capture the water as it comes off the spillway, and I'm going to put a swale in. Where I want to put my first swale in is I want to put it in coming off the key point on my property. So now here you go into permaculture, you go into this literature, and you start watching these videos about key points and key lines, and it gets really, really complicated. We talk about where it goes from convex to concave, and you're looking for this sweet point. And listen, there's a real easy way to explain this. The key point in the valley, the key point always the way we design is we design from the valley out, all right? The key point in the valley is that point on the landscape that when you're walking uphill, you start to have to work really hard to get up the landscape. It's that point where it goes from kind of a shallow grade to the point where it starts to scoop up and it's a lot of work. That's the key point right there where it starts to scoop up. Another way to explain it, it's the point where if you were riding on a lawn mowing tractor, would you be scared to drive a lawnmower across here? How about right here?
Yep.
You're going to roll down the hill right here. It's the point at which you don't want to go sideways on the landscape, on a mower, on a tractor. That's the key point. It's too steep to put equipment on. It's too steep to do much with because there's also more erosion there. The more you disturb the steep slope, the greater the chance of erosion. So let's stay away from that. Let's start our earthworks at that point and go down from there. So in this landscape, this key point sits right about here. That's my key point. And then the key line comes off of that point on contour. So to find contour, you make yourself an A-frame. I just had to do this. I mean, I did this for 30 courses without this, and I finally, matchsticks, a little chain. And so there's a little mark on here, or there's actually two marks, but there's one in the middle that actually makes it, which is the contour mark. And Milton will show you how to build an A-frame and how to set it up so it's on contour. But you can see that if this is perfectly level, the chain is in line with that one little dot. But if I take it and I move my finger down, the chain goes down. And so now I'm off, the instrument is off contour. But as I move it back up, it's back on the dot again. So now I know that this point and this point are on contour. They're level with the horizon. Or if you say, if this landscape was flooding and the water started coming up on it, wherever the water meets the land, the shoreline, that's contour. So in this case, I put this down here and I put it right there, and the chain is hanging down beyond my thing, and I keep backing it up, and right about there is the sweet point. So I'll go ahead and take out a peg and I'll mark it. And now I take my A-frame and I move it down to the next point, set it down right next to the peg. That's downhill. Back it up, 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 back right about there. And that's my second point. Do the same thing. Isn't this easy? But you read it. I couldn't get it reading it. I just couldn't figure it out. I had to build one of these things and go out and just play with it, right? And then like, duh, you feel so silly, right? So That's how we find contour on this. So what I'm going to do is I can see these dots. I'm going to pull them out now. And I'm going to go ahead and connect these lines, and I'm going to cut in a swale. And I think I'll have it come over here, and then right here I'm going to put a pond right underneath it. So if I have a lot of extra water, I'm going to have some livestock and that kind of thing. All the extra water coming down here is going to be grabbed and bring it over here, and this is one of the drier parts of the landscape, isn't it? Right at the foot of a ridge. That's a really dry spot right there. Now I'm going to have a pond right there. I want to give you another example of this. This is a really simple way to explain how you have control over water. If I have a 4-foot section of gutter, just like off the house, right? But it's closed on both ends and there's no hole on the bottom, okay? There's no downspout. It's just a gutter closed off. And I set it right here and I pour the water over here. Where's it going to go? We did this yesterday, right? Water goes over to here. So you pour water here, water goes across here, but at some point you don't see the water moving anymore. All the water just rises. Even though I'm pouring the water in here, all the water rises up. Or if the water just came off the gutter or the shingles and just dropped in, the whole thing would just fill up with water, all right? And then when it gets up to the top, it just starts spilling over all over the place. But if I take this thing and it's full of water and I take the end here and I take just the top inch and I bend the top inch of the metal down, what happens to the water? So let's close that up, fill it up. If I bend this end down, where's the water go? Who has control over where the water's going to go? You do. You do. What if both of these were up here and I took a little segment right here and I bent a little 1-inch segment 6 inches wide and I bent it down? Where does the water go? Right here. What if the ridge is right here and I open it up right here? Now not only does the water come out, it comes out and it goes like this over the landscape. No erosion. Spreads out, nice and smooth. Right? You're totally in control. Water is your obedient servant. It will just go downhill wherever you want it to go. And when you want to hold it, dig a hole. Well, hell yeah, dig a hole. The other thing I want to talk about, I'm going to do a little bit more here with this key lining and stuff, but I also wanted to, in permaculture design, we talk about, where do you want to locate your home. If you were a person and you had a lot of money and you wanted everybody to look up to you like, oh, they must be amazing, you put your house up here. The view is great, right? And then everybody has to look up at you and you can look down at those poor people down there. And, it's kind of an elevated position, all right? So this is a place of prestige. But from a permaculture perspective, what is it going to take to build a house, to put in a well, to get water there, to get energy there? How are you going to keep that thing warm in the wintertime when wind's wrapping around? Does wind pull heat out of a house? Hell yeah. Summertime, all that bright sun. From an energy perspective, this is not a wise place to put a structure. It's beautiful, but it is energy intensive. So let's say we have a creek running down over here. What if I put my house down here? Floodplain, right? There's another reason you might not want to have it down here. In the fall, early fall, or late fall, when it starts to freeze, where does everything freeze first? Up here or down here? Down here. The cold air comes down, and as long as that cold air is moving, it won't freeze much. But when it gets down here and the shrubs and everything stops it and it sits, this is where it's going to freeze, the low ground. Warm air rises, cold air drops. This is the first thing to freeze in the fall and the last thing to thaw out in the spring. You put your house down here, put your gardens down here, you're going to be fighting the frost all the time. The sweet zone in these landscapes is always somewhere up around the middle. Now you can capture water up here. You can actually feed and channel water, gravity feed water down to your system. And you're out of the frost zone, you're out of the flood zone, and you still have a nice view. You do have some elevation. So as long as I've got a house right here, I think I'm going to put a pond in. This is going to be south over here. I think I'll put a pond in on the south side of my house. What might be one of the advantages of having a pond by your house? Yeah. Fire protection. What if you had a little pump all set up and ready to go, and any chance there's a chance of fire? I mean, there are these great examples where people have set up a sprinkler system on each corner of their house, and they're in an area that's prone to fire, but it's right next to a pond, and here comes the fire, and they turn on the pump an hour or two beforehand, and they basically just spray all of their land around them, the top of their house, all of their foliage, and the fire comes right up, goes right around their property, and just keeps on going. And there's a green island right in the middle of this barren area. What's another advantage of having a property, particularly on the south face here? Solar gain, right? In the wintertime, if you need the heat. That's it. How many of you ever walked by a pond and in the wintertime, but or in the cold weather, and the sun is shining on the pond, and you walk by and the sun hits you in the eye, and literally you need your sunglasses for the sun coming off. How many of you felt the heat coming off of that as well? The radiant heat bounces right off the top of the pond, goes right in. So now you're getting the sunlight from the sun itself coming through your windows, and you're getting it again off the pond coming into your house. Pretty nice design. Now, if you live in an area where it's cloudy all the frickin' time, well then you're not going to get much of a gain, right? So you have to decide when it's worth it. Would this be a good design up in Alaska? Capture all that sun? How much sun do you have in the middle of winter in Alaska? And you get it all in the summertime, and it's all around like this, right? So it's just not a very good design for the north you go, all right? But it's great for the temperate climates. So now I'm going to put my second swale in right here. So whatever that doesn't catch, this will catch, right? And let's say we decide to put in some kind of a linear food forest. A couple of those along here. So now we'll plant our trees and our orchard all along through here, and all kinds of really good stuff, right? And let's continue the orchard along here and orchard here. So now you come out of your house and you come down and walk your orchards and mob graze in between there with your chickens or your goats or whatever you want to do. But let's say also we want to do some key lining. So we find the point, from this point on, we decide we're going to be doing pasture from this point out, all right? So we come in with our single bottom, our four shank keyline plow. We drop it in the ground at the valley, and we work our way out on contour. I can just keep on going, I guess. And we do our entire property in key lining. Everything we're going to be putting into pasture. You obviously can do this for any situation. If you got a piece of land and you're not going to be moving onto it for a few years, oh my gosh, do this. And wherever you're going to be putting in orchards or gardens or anything, you get this done ahead of time, and you're just that much further ahead of the game. And there's a technique for that, and I'll show you on the slide upstairs. But anyway, so that's the key lining. The other thing I wanted to be sure to show you on this is the last element of this design. Let's say that we end up putting our gardens right by our house. So we probably would set up our gardens, if we have some slope, we probably set them up on contour like this, right? So these might be swales, or they could be part of a path system, But and we'll do our annual gardening here. We actually can run a pipe out of here from the bottom of our pond with a little valve on it. Whenever we want, we can have a hose that runs along back here, and we'll have gravity water coming into our garden. We also could have fresh rainwater to our house for anything else that we might need. But what could we do at the very top here and on these steepest slopes? What could we put on here, if anything, to do a better job of building topsoil, holding more water?
Windbreak trees.
Trees. Oh, I like the sound of that. What if we covered this whole thing with trees? And we're not going to be climbing up these steep hills and stuff. Wow, that would be a great use for that area. Produce some shade for the pond, produce some shade downhill. There's a couple of other advantages. If I cover this with trees, and every fall when the leaves fall and things start to break down, rain is still going to come. And when they do, what does the rain pick up? Nutrients. And where are the nutrients going as they come through down the property? Towards everything else you're doing that's production. You're using this forest to harvest carbon out of thin air, turn it into trees and branches and shrubs, It falls on the ground, turns into organic matter, which feeds the bacteria and the worms in the soil, which create nutrients for plants. And when it rains, those nutrients wash down across your landscape. And what captures it all the way down? Your swales and your key lines and your plants, and basically you're self-fertilizing the entire landscape just by having a polyculture of trees. There's another advantage to this too. If you have this thing covered with trees, and now it's fall, and the cold air is coming in, and here comes the frost, right? When that first wave of cold air comes in, it comes down, it's pushing down on your wood lot. Is the air in the woods warmer or colder than this up here? Warmer, a lot warmer. How many of you walked around at night, and the air temperature is cold, but you walk under the trees, and all of a sudden it's warm again? And then you walk out, you know, where you're not protected, and it's cold again. Right? You can feel a 10, 15 degree change in temperatures. But what happens when that cold air comes in, it pushes down on the forest, and wherever the tree line opens up, let's say it opens up right here above your house, warm air is pushed out of the forest over that area, and this whole area doesn't even freeze because you've got warm air coming out of the forest. You'll just notice this sometimes. We have the grass and you have the trees, and walk for those frosty mornings where everything's frosty out here, and walk towards the trees, and you'll find a 20 to 100 foot span that is not frozen because you've had warm air coming out of the forest, keeping everything thawed out. So that's called what in permaculture? Or anything. It's a microclimate. The edge where the forest meets the prairie. There's another advantage of an edge or a microclimate, is we're harvesting yield. And then one other thing I think I want to do on here is imagine that we want to create other productive areas on our homestead or our farm, and let's say we decide to put in a plant guild right here. Let's say we have a nut tree, and then we have some fruit trees and shrubs around it and some herbs and stuff, and but we want to take advantage of any extra moisture we can. So, you know, a swale across the entire, or let's say we want to put another one here, all right? We could put a swale across the entire landscape, and that's fine. But what if we made it a really light swale? I'm not sure I got that on contour. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure I don't, but you'll get the idea, right? What if we do a light swale, and then right above where my system is, I take the swale and I go deep here, then come up and go deep here, and then come up again and bring this around. These actually, the shallow swale acts as a feeder. It grabs water, and wherever it's lowest in your swale, if the bottom of your swale is flat, you have water going in and it soaks in. But if your swale goes like this, where's the water going to go? It's all going to the lowest spot first, and as the water soaks in, all the water moves to this point, soaks in right above the systems I'm putting in. Once again, you've got control. And you can even make these, you know, even fatter, more substantial.
Would you make that a spillway, or would you leave it as just gravity?
Yeah, and so then what happens is this what I call these are feeder swales. Your feeder swale will actually become the spillway. We could set that up where we could have it spill over here, or maybe we want just to go right into our key line system, and we'll put it right here. Something like that. So let's play with this just a little bit. Let's put some water in here. So I'm going to make it rain over here on this side of the mountain. And let's see what happens. If I built it right, it should go to the pond. What's happening? It's raining over here, and my pond is filling up over here. Yeah, so it's just raining all over. It spilled over a little bit over there. But what do you know? I've got something to capture it, right? So, it's holding a lot of water. See if I can get my spillway to go.
With having that kind of slant on the backside and not having any kind of
Go ahead.
trails or
Yeah.
anything, would you potentially wash out your key lines on the bottom of your runout?
Not if you build them well. Yeah, you just have to build them well. And you always, anytime you do any kind of earthworks, you've got to protect it right away. You want to put mulch on it, get plants on it, so you secure your berms so they don't wash away. That's a good question. All right, so I'm going to put more water here. I'm filling the swale so fast it's spilling over the swale before the pond. You can see what's actually happening. It very could well be that this little lip right here is lower than my spillway. So it's spilling out here before it actually gets to the spillway. But I would know that ahead of time because I've got instruments and I can just go around and I can tell exactly where the water's going to come through before it ever rains. But it's still coming. All right, so anyway, water went down my valley. What's going on?
Hey, that pond is filling.
It's raining over here. It's raining on this side of the mountain over here. My ponds are filling on the other side of the landscape. So water's coming out the spillway. Filling up things. I'm going to make it do more. Woo!
Major rainy day.
So my ponds are filled up by my house and over here on the driest part of the landscape. I'm just going to start pouring water on here. This is like, this take forever. Do you remember how much water I put on the first time? It was 1 straw full. Look at how much water you're holding.
And you've got your pipe to feed your house.
Pretty nice.
Oh!